Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, The Power of Skills, Empowering Talent Transformation at Time of Disruption, with Steve Feyer, Director of Product Marketing at Eightfold, and Claude Werder, SVP and Principal HCM Analyst at Brandon Hall Group. I would like to extend a thank you to Eightfold for sponsoring today's webinar. Eightfold is an AI company based in Silicon Valley working with enterprises across industries and around the world. The company uses artificial intelligence technology to transform how enterprises manage their talent throughout the talent lifecycle, from recruiting and hiring through employee mobility, retention, and skills development. The company's AI approach is also designed to prevent bias and support diversity. This AI approach is transformative because it helps companies to think about talent differently. Traditionally, you hired someone who had done the job before and could be trusted to do it again. Today, skills change so quickly that if you hire someone who has done just the exact job before, the job will change so that their existing skills are no longer sufficient or possibly not even relevant. So you need to hire, promote, and think about what people can learn and what they can become, not just what they can do today. In other words, you need to hire for potential. In today's presentation, you'll learn more about how AI can give your company this ability. The ability to deliver on human potential with AI requires real expertise in artificial intelligence. Eightfold's founding team are world experts and are at the cutting edge of delivering business-ready AI. In order to achieve the best results with technology, you need to have the best technology. And that is what the Eightfold team is delivering to companies today. I wanted to also share a little bit about Brandon Hall Group. Brandon Hall Group is a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. Our vision is to inspire a better workplace experience. We have world-class research, data, and expertise across all areas in human capital management. Currently, we have open surveys in workforce management maturity, transitioning to new realities of the COVID-19 experience, and extended enterprise learning. We would love to hear from you. In exchange, you could receive a gift card, free research reports, and more. To participate, please visit our website, www.brandonhall.com, and click on Open Surveys. And finally, a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. The playback will be provided to everyone within 24 hours of the webinar in a follow-up email. If you would like to ask a question, please do so by typing it into the questions box for our presenters. If you would like to download a copy of the presentation instantly, you may find it in the handout section. And now let's turn it over to Claude so we can get started.
Well, thank you, Danny, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks once again to Eightfold for sponsoring our webinar. I believe we've got a great insight for you today on how AI-driven skill discovery and analysis can drive talent transformation. My role today is to kind of lay the groundwork by explaining the scope of the challenge and opportunities around skills based on our research. So to start with, as you can see here on the slide, in this country, and maybe more than in others, employees are really not engaged. Our research shows that only 15% of employees are highly engaged at work. Performance management is also ineffective. Managers don't connect in meaningful ways with their teams often enough. This comes across over and over again in our research. And there are many different drivers for the lack of engagement. And though it might not be the first thing to cross your mind, organizations' inability to identify and develop critical skills is a big reason. Let's look at it this way. If an organization can't align on the critical skills needed in the present and future, the L&D function can't produce learning aligned with business goals. If L&D is not training employees on skills that the business needs, employees can't improve their skills and take steps to advance their careers. If employees don't see a career path, they're less engaged at work, and they start to look elsewhere for opportunity. That leads to the engagement problem, increases turnover, which in turn hurts the business and employer brand. So lack of focus on development of critical skills has a huge impact on the business. And this lack of skills orientation has made the economic upheaval of the coronavirus pandemic even more damaging for employers. As companies seek to rebound or change their business models, they don't necessarily have the right skills foundation to deal with present problems, let alone the skills they may need in the immediate and longer term future as they grapple to drive business strategies and agendas. Even before COVID-19, more than half of employers told us that they did not have enough talent with the right skills to drive business success. And now, in many cases, new skill sets will be needed as companies begin to climb that steep hill toward economic recovery. And while talent needs can't always be met with current employees, the most cost-effective and strategically sound approach to meeting talent needs is, of course, to develop the skills of the employees you know rather than rely on job candidates you don't know. But without a solid skills orientation, the ability to understand skills and how they intersect, different job roles, it's difficult to build talent from within. And so many organizations pass over talent that actually has the potential, and they roll the dice with outside candidates. They also might not be the right fit because recruiters might not be looking for the right skills in the first place because they haven't really been clearly defined. So because organizations don't have that strong orientation around skills, career development is also lacking. And again, it leads to the engagement and attrition problem. A recently completed career development study showed that less than 1 in 5 organizations have a well-established career development program. Now, a lot of organizations, about 60%, are building or have recently launched a career development program. So it's definitely top of mind. Organizations know they need to develop careers. But as of now, and this research is only about a month old, 81% of organizations do not have a well-established, mature career development program. And that's a major reason why employers struggle to meet talent needs. But the good news is that if organizations can get a better handle on how to develop skills and integrate them into their evolving career growth programs, they can quickly make progress. But until skills are better developed, the majority of organizations, almost 2/3 according to our research, can't meet current talent needs because learning is just not sufficiently linked to career growth and critical job roles. Organizations create a lot of learning, but adoption is pretty low. It doesn't resonate with employees in terms of their career aspirations or skills they need to better perform their current jobs. Now, as this slide shows, as you can imagine, given the scope of the challenges we've outlined here, there are many impediments, many reasons for lack of effective skill development. The biggest barrier, once again, is that leaders don't agree on how to build capabilities for the workforce. And this is because most organizations don't have the tools and expertise to evaluate and understand skills and skill gaps, which is what Steve is going to shed light on for us today. Another barrier is not having a strong talent pipeline. This means there's a lack of sophisticated workforce and succession planning across most organizations. Employees identified as high potential usually have formal development plans, so they may not be aligned with the real needs of the employer or organization because, the skills issues that we've discussed. But worse still, almost half of organizations don't have IDPs, individual development plans for every employee. But in the digital era, everyone needs to be able to contribute. Everyone needs a path to build capability. And as you will see, technology is critical to success, and 45% of organizations in this research that we're showing here recognize this. So the upshot here is all of these problems are related back to a lack of skill identification and development, and that's why companies are struggling. So our research shows that organizations can't meet their talent needs because they struggle with engagement, they have a hard time retaining talent, as we talked about, but more importantly, in my mind, they're not agile in reacting to changing market conditions, and they are suffering, in many cases, from a lack of creativity and innovation. That's what our research is telling us. So there you have it. Inability to identify and develop skills has an enormous impact, more than most organizations realize, I think. But there's a way to solve these problems effectively, and Steve's going to talk about that path to progress in just a couple of minutes. Before we get rolling, I want to get a sense from all of you on where you are in your skills development. So we have a quick poll question for you. What is your organization's maturity level for skills development? We have 5 choices. Is it dormant, meaning no organized skill development plan right now? Infancy, beginning to address skill development at the beginning stages. Developing, you have an active skills program that's evolving. Achieving, that you're making progress on updating skills for current business needs. And then leading, you've identified future skills and are making progress on top of current skills. So it'll be interesting. This group obviously has a real strong interest in this, or you wouldn't have signed up for the webinar. And to see if where you are with skills is any different than what our research is showing. Either way, I think we have some great content here that you'll be able to take advantage of in terms of what technology and AI can do to kind of reshape this challenge and make progress. So Danny, how are we coming along with responses?
Okay, I'll bring them up now.
Let's take a look. So yes, this pretty much parallels what our research has shown. About 65%, 2/3 are at level 2 or level 3, infancy or developing. So it's something that's clearly on your mind. You're trying to make progress. That makes total sense. And I think if you're beginning to invest time and resources into this, you're definitely on the right track, because I think this is just a critical, not only a problem, but also a critical opportunity, as you're going to see, for really making progress across the organization in a variety of key performance indicators. So wherever you are with skills, there are critical questions you must consider and that we're going to try to help you with today. So let's go over those quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Steve. So as a foundation, you need to understand the skills available in your organization, and then connect that with how are these skills being applied now. Our natural instinct is to deal in the present because we have to meet current deliverables and customer and market requests. And as such, we ask, do we have the skills we need to meet today's goals? And we need to be able to answer that. And then when it comes to setting strategy, we want to think predictively rather than reactively. So instead, we need to ask, will we have the skills we need to meet tomorrow's goals? And we'll also need to find ways to discover opportunities that we can take advantage of, so we know if there are hidden pockets of potential within our workforce that we can begin to deploy. And we need to try to explore how we can take advantage of maybe talent that we haven't been aware of. And of course, the constant key question that as business leaders we're focused on is, who are our critical people? And these questions are easier to answer if you leverage data and AI, and Steve is going to give us some great insights on how this works and how you can make skills a strength. Steve?
Well, thank you very much, Claude, and Danny, thank you as well. And thank you, everyone, for taking some time out of your day to join us for this webinar. I hope you'll take away some concrete and actionable information about how you can begin to use skills to drive positive transformations in your talent process, and why that is especially important now in a time of such great disruption in our lives and workforces. But before going any further in talking about this topic, I do want to define what we mean when we say skills. A skill is fundamentally the most basic measure of what someone can do, broken down in the most granular possible way. That means that a skill is not going to be tied to a specific job or a specific company. If you, for example, produce a specific kind of report, we do it exactly this way at my company, well, producing that exact report would not be a skill because that's very specific to your job and company. But perhaps report writing would be a skill. Skill is also something that requires learning or practice. If everyone does it, then it's not a skill. So if you think about something that we all do every day, like eating, perhaps you're eating a sandwich right now. Eating is not a skill. It's something we all do, but food tasting would be a skill because it's a valuable professional skill. Finally, a skill should be transferable. If it's something that is not going to be of value to you outside of your current role, not going to be valuable to any company but your current company, that also might not represent a skill. It should be transferable. And based on this, skills become the best single measure of career progression across a career and across a company. So Claude's research, the research from Brandon Hall Group, shows so clearly why skills are needed. We see these issues with retention. The great majority of people switch companies when they switch jobs. They don't have internal mobility within their current company. And they're not engaged. Just 15% of employees are highly engaged at work. And performance management doesn't tie back to what people can do and to people gaining new capabilities, both to benefit themselves and to benefit their company, when only a minority, a small minority of workers report that they are having these kinds of performance conversations. And all of this ties back to skills. All of these challenges and others as well tie back to skills at the very center of them. It's because companies are struggling to use skills and manage their workforces with skills. That is the common thread of why these types of survey results are so poor and why companies are struggling to meet their talent needs in the coming years. So let's dive into this a little bit further. But before doing that, I have not a poll question, but really more of a quiz question for you, and would invite you to put what you think the answer is into the Q&A window here. So here's a question for you. There's a number on the slide in front of you of 1.4 million. What is this number? What does this number represent? What do you think?
It'll be interesting to see what people come up with.
Yeah, what is 1.4 million, and why do I have that number up on the screen in front of you today? Let's give a couple more seconds for a few more folks to put in an answer. That's right. Yeah, someone said wasted hours. Well, hopefully not. But thank you. I saw a number of people put in the right answer. 1.4 million is the number of skills that exist. There's 1.4 million, 1,400,000 unique skills. At least that is according to Eightfold's artificial intelligence. We've detected more than 1.4 million unique skills in our analysis of more than 1.2 billion, with a B, career profiles. So that is just the starting point of the complexity of why skills are so hard to use today. Well, now we've defined skills as what people can do at a granular level, and that's not too hard to understand. But using skills in practice has been very hard for organizations in the past, and these are the reasons why. Starting with that number, 1.4 million, the number of skills has absolutely exploded over time, and that's for a lot of good reasons. Our world's grown more complicated, it's grown more global, we have more products and services, and an accelerating number all the time. And so the number of distinct, measurable skills has kept pace with this growing complexity. The relationships among skills and roles is always evolving, and that's another reason why skills are hard to use. Take as an example programming languages, which make it easier to create software and to create products that act as they're supposed to with software behind them. But if you think about what a software engineer does, that's changed very dramatically as programming languages and programming techniques change. Each year, the things that a software engineer does may change quite substantially, let alone over a longer period of time, like a decade. Based on these two reasons alone, and others, it's very hard to maintain a manually built skills ontology. So by ontology, we just mean a library of skills and skill relationships. That's really all a library is, an ontology is. So you can imagine it, picture it a bit like a physical library And you could think of it, the organization, a bit like the Dewey Decimal System, if you remember that, which organizes the books in the library. But then if you actually try to imagine managing your skills ontology that way, the way a physical library of books is managed, you can see why it's so hard to do. First of all, you've got 1.4 million books, which is a huge number to try to manage. And there are thousands of new books coming in every month, and that number is growing. And this is not clean like a real library where you've got that Dewey Decimal System that's been barely changing over the decades. In fact, the way you have to organize that library is constantly changing and reorganized every month. And so trying to manage a manual skills ontology becomes an incredibly difficult challenge. The definitions of skills also evolve over time. Think about a common skill, something that probably many of us talk about when we talk about the work that we do, which is communications skill. Are you a good communicator? Do you have communication skill? Well, what does that mean? If you said that in 1980, perhaps that would mean that you were good on the phone. Perhaps that meant you were a good typist. But today, if you have communication skill, that may mean that you're good at sending email. That means you may be good at Zoom meetings. Maybe that even means you know how to use emojis well, this language that's universal now across the world. So what communication skill means, this very common skill, has changed over time and will continue to change. And finally, the context around skills changes. That doesn't just mean the number of skills or even just how skills relate to roles or even the definition, but more than that, how a skill relates to a specific role contextually, or if skills have prerequisites to learn other skills, or if skills commonly appear together. If someone knows skill A, B, C, and D, then I can say they very much are very likely to know skill E as well. Or we could say that if someone knows skills A, B, C, and D, that's very unlikely to know skill E. All of that kind of information is context. Let's dig a little further into context in particular to understand why it's so difficult to manage skills today manually. So skills can be very hard to understand without context. In fact, they can be virtually meaningless without the context. I just want to give a couple of examples to illustrate this. So one is synonyms. Especially if you're using some keyword matching or keyword detection technology, you lack the context, which can make that kind of usage very difficult. The word Java, for example, is an example I always use. Java is a programming language, a very common programming language, but it is also the name of an island in Indonesia. And from that, we get a very common term for coffee. So if a keyword detection tool finds the word Java, does that mean that the person who listed that on their resume is a software engineer, or is that person a barista? I bet you could come up with a lot more examples like that to illustrate context. Another issue is how words and skills that the words represent relate to roles. And this is also very common as well. I want to use the word planning, which is certainly an important skill set. And think about how that relates to roles as an example. So if you're a software engineer with planning skill, perhaps that means that you are good at creating code testing plans and scheduling release cycles for software. But if you're a computer-aided design expert, if you're a graphics designer, perhaps planning is around drafting. If you are a building manager, planning may involve working with government agencies on planning. May involve permitting and regulations and scheduling. And if you're an event planner, yet again, a different set of skills associated with the word planning. Perhaps that involves managing vendors and communications and creative design. So even the words that we use and the context around them create extra complexity when it comes to skills and creates a true challenge in trying to manage skills. Another issue around context is what that skill really means, because a single skill is not unidimensional. That issue around planning starts to get into this. And I like to illustrate this with cooking as a common example, because it's something that many of us have as a personal skill. Cooking is often something someone will list as a hobby on their resume, but what does that actually mean as a skill? For example, if you are If you say you have cooking skill, does that mean you can cook any cuisine? Probably not. For example, if you are good at cooking Szechuan Chinese food, perhaps you cannot cook French food or vice versa. Or what about speed? If you are very good at cooking things quickly, that's the kind of skill that I would think of as important for a short order chef. But someone who cooks food very slowly might be a barbecuing expert. Both are perfectly valid examples of cooking, but they're very separate. Now, what about different types of food? Personally, I'm a vegetarian. I think I'm a very good home cook, but if you hand me a piece of beef, I have no idea what to do with it. And about that home cooking, if you can cook for 5 people, does that mean you can cook for 500 or vice versa? Those are also very different skills. So just from this one word and just from this one concept of cooking, we can see that there's a lot of nuance around the skill. Cooking on its own leaves out all of that context. And in fact, just the word cooking on its own, within that, with all the different ways you could describe cooking, French cooking versus Szechuan cooking, catering versus home cooking, short order cooking versus fine cuisine versus barbecuing, all of these different contexts, in fact, mean that cooking within it would have dozens of different skills, maybe hundreds of skills. And that explains why we can get to more than 1 million total skills overall when we analyze skills bottom up. I want to also give a little context around the differences between skills and roles. First, we were talking about cooking before. So perhaps if you're like me, like most of us, you've been spending a lot more time at home cooking. And so perhaps you've been using a service like Blue Apron. Well, Blue Apron teaches you how to cook a certain recipe. And if you use Blue Apron a lot, does that make you good enough at cooking to take a job as a chef? I can't give you an answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. But it's possible that it does. Something like Eightfold AI, if we found that people who use Blue Apron a lot become good enough at cooking to take professional cooking jobs, then the answer to that would be yes. Yes, this is enough to learn how to become a chef. But we don't know that based on just me saying so. Now, what about writing? I started my career as a copy editor, but there are tools like Grammarly now that make people better editors and writers on their own. There are still professional editors, though. So what does an editor do? That job has changed. The skills required to be an editor have changed because of new technology. We also see this with software engineering and programming. You can be an average programmer at a certain programming language, but if you're very good at searching for advice and searching for techniques, you can become an expert at that programming language in terms of delivering code. So that intersection of search and programming skill can emphasize and highlight and improve that skill. And finally, an example I love because I think it's such an interesting future is around self-driving. If you have a Tesla, your car can already drive itself in certain situations. So what does that mean around driving skill? The answer may not be so simple if you think about the world of piloting today. Your commercial airliner still has a pilot at the controls, but there are also large planes that are flown remotely by drone operators. These drones are operated by someone with a joystick in a facility that could be thousands of miles away. And yet, those are different skills. So we can see this as well. All of this shows why we need to rethink the skills today. We need to understand skills differently, understand the relationships, understand the context and the individuals behind them. If you're trying to use some manual ontology to manage those skills, if you're trying to use a paper library, it's no different than trying to use paper-based methods and library-based methods to go find an answer when you have Google available to you today. This all explains why companies that haven't been able to move beyond these manual methods haven't been able to use skills as part of their talent process. And I think that explains why the focus on skills has been so lacking in practice and fundamentally so ineffective at truly transforming talent practices. And so that's why artificial intelligence can come in. The key difference is not using a top-down manual ontology. It's using a bottom-up self-learning model across all of the data that exists, starting from the data, starting from the reality, and looking for that context and matching. When an AI model discovers the relationships among skills, discovers the relationships between skills and roles, discovers how roles change, how skills change over time, and understands the context, you can finally use skills in the way that you really want to create transformative talent practices, to create great experiences for candidates and employees, and ultimately to reset and resettle what you're doing from a talent perspective in your organization. So on the next slide, I want to give a little visualization about how this works at Eightfold. And as you'll see from this slide, this is something we could spend a whole hour on, and certainly we don't have time for that today. But I want to give you just a very brief explanation of what we're doing with artificial intelligence in order to generate this type of skills information. So again, this is a one-slide illustration of our data. There's a huge amount of complexity behind this. But first and foremost, what we're doing at Eightfold is a type of AI called deep learning. This is also called neural networks. And this type of AI is a way of calculating toward a given outcome. You take this type of AI, you feed it in a bunch of data, and you tell the AI what your goal is going to be. And the AI will then look for the factors that predict that goal, that predict that outcome. So at Eightfold, we're interested in people's careers. We're interested in people's potential and what factors can predict and guide a career progression for an individual. The outcome that we're specifically trying to measure is what is an individual likely to do next in their career based on everything that we know about them and everything that they've done before. And so what we know about individuals is represented on the left in that triangle diagram, which shows the data that we receive from our enterprise customers, which feed this model. Our AI then learns more about the world at large from the data sources on the right. And we do have a lot of data. So starting from the left, we have more than 1.2 billion profiles of individuals. So that means 1.2 billion is a substantial portion of the world's workforce. And that means that we have many examples of virtually every career and every kind of experience across the world, which means we can really make meaningful predictions around any kind of career. You can imagine those profiles as a resume. Think of that as 1.2 billion resumes, although a profile may not actually be a resume. Now, in addition to that, we also have a tremendous amount of information about people's career movements, not just the jobs that they've had, but also the jobs that they've applied for. And that's what's represented here by screening results and interview hours. So we not only see the jobs people had, but also if you applied for a job, were you offered an interview? And if you were interviewed, were you made a job offer? If you were made that job offer, did you accept that offer or not? So each of those binary decision points, we also can capture that data, which creates a substantially more accurate model for predicting how people can move through their careers. And pairing that with the information on the right, that's some additional context. The public data boils down to the kinds of things that a human, a recruiter, or a hiring manager might know or might be able to look up, and which the AI should also know as additional context. So some examples there are, for example, is this a university that is well regarded or not? Or if this person lives in location A, are they willing to travel to location B for a job? Or is that not a commutable distance? Those are the kinds of things that we can gather from the public data. The deep learning then combines all this information to predict what someone is likely to do next in their career. What can they succeed at? How can they reach their potential? And we then deliver specific business-ready applications in order to deliver these kinds of transformative practices. But as the most important single factor I want to focus on is what we can see about skills. Because the AI, based on the information it receives, has a bottom-up determination of what predicts success. And one of the things that the AI sees is that skills are hugely important. This AI recognizes the distinct skills that individuals have, more than 1.4 million of those skills, and can then calculate all the relationships among those skills and titles and companies and jobs over time, and then make skills the basis of these kinds of business applications. So we were talking before about context, the advantages of context today. When we apply this type of deep learning AI to skills, what can we see about some of the context? I want to show just a couple of examples of that. So here's one example. We're looking at a title, Director of Operations, and we're seeing how that title matches to skills at two different types of companies, an engineering company versus a financial services company. And we can see that there are a lot of skills that are in common here. For example, leadership is an important skill for this title at both kinds of company. But there are also many differences. We can see the engineering company has a bunch of engineering types of skills, whereas the financial services company has some different set of skills, including some that are financial related. This is very important context. The title alone would not tell us that. But by understanding thousands of examples of these kinds of jobs and careers, we can understand the skills that go into it and the context around the company. And if we reverse this a little bit, we can see just another kind of example. If we have a single skill, how that applies across multiple roles. Here we're looking at the most common skills across three different commonly used titles. And just as a note, this is for US only in this view. So for these three titles for US workers, we can see the common skills that people have. And we can see as a representation here, green is a skill that's very common, yellow is a skill that's common but not as common, and red is also pretty common but not seen as much as the yellow. And we highlighted negotiation as something which we think of as a very important skill for many roles. But do you see that negotiation is seen as less critical for technical recruiting and account executives compared to a realtor? Well, one thing I might take away from this is, suppose you're a technical recruiter, and the thing that you are absolutely fantastic at is negotiation. You're a technical recruiter, but you're the best negotiator anyone's ever seen in that job. Well, if you're thinking about a career change right now, based on that skill, I'd say maybe you should look at realty, because that's a job where that skill is even more important than in the job that you had before. So this is just an example of using skills within business process in order to understand individuals and roles and develop talent transformation practices. So underlying everything within our AI model, we have a skills relationship graph. The AI has built a graph across 1.4 million skills. You can try to imagine it as a cloud in 3D space. And as new data comes in, as the AI is always seeing new information, recalculating, that cloud is constantly shifting, adjusting. There's no strict hierarchy across all of those skills because it's not manual. It's a loosely connected graph that accounts for the changes that it sees over time and the decisions that people make. So that is what we've been able to do with our skills graph. But the most important thing is not just the skills themselves, because a library that nobody can access and use is not much use at all. So what it's really about is what can you do in order to manage your workforce skills at scale. So I want to give you some specific examples about how you can transform talent practices with skills, starting with some recruiting use cases and then moving towards some internal talent management use cases. So first of all, with skills, you can find the candidates who can do the job, because you can use skills as a requirement. For example, instead of writing a bunch of sentences in a job description that say, here's the skills we're looking for, which someone may or may not read, you can simply say, I'm looking for these skills, and define those exactly. So here's an example, looking for an individual contributor in an experienced architect, someone who's going to help with the design of a software product. And this is for an HR software product specifically. Now, using this technology, you can pick from any of the 1.4 million identified skills and see what closely related skills exist that you may also want to consider for your search, and define who you're looking for based on the skills that they have. So we see here a set of skills that are desired for this experienced architect role. This is far more flexible, far more nuanced than using a keyword search alone, although you could set a keyword requirement if you'd like. And of course, you can set other requirements around as you would in a typical job description. Must have college degree, must be in this area, we're looking for this amount of experience, and so forth. but then skills becomes the center of it. And when skills are at the center of it, you can then evaluate candidates based on those skills. So here is a portion of a profile now viewed against the skills requirement we saw on the last slide. This person would be a very strong candidate according to the AI's analysis. They have a 5 out of 5 match for the experienced architect position. And part of that's because they have other factors, such as they worked at a company that we're interested in, and they have the right amount of experience. But we can also see their skills, which is incredibly valuable. So in this example, I see 3 validated skills. These are skills that the AI is very confident that this person has. In most cases, that's because the person wrote that skill on a resume or another form of their profile. And based on their prior jobs and experience, those prior experiences prove that they were able to apply those skills. So we can validate, yes, this person has this skill to a very high degree of likelihood. But more than that, there are some likely skills as well. These are skills the person is very likely to have based on everything we know about them, the jobs, the education, the companies they've worked for. But these skills are not skills that this individual has specifically declared that they have. Nevertheless, because we know about the context of their career, the AI can say, yes, other people with these backgrounds have learned these skills, therefore we can be very confident this person has them too. But there's more. Here's a skill to validate, graphic arts. So this skill we said we want for the job, this is a skill we want this person to have for the job, and this person has said that they have it. It's somewhere on their profile. But based on the AI's analysis, there's not enough information to be confident that this person really has this skill. So this becomes a very useful data point. If I'm an interviewer, I should probably dig in on graphic arts skill with this candidate and make sure that they can actually do it. Just because we have to validate it doesn't mean that that skill is missing, but we do have to validate it. However, there is one missing skill here. This is a skill that I really want for the job, but based on all the evidence about this person's prior experience and background, the AI sees it's pretty doubtful that this person actually has that skill. It's possible they do, but it's likely to be missing. So with this kind of capability, you can dial in exactly on the skills that you need for the job and exactly match the candidates to the skills that you need, because this analysis is calculated for every single person for that job. I want to show you just another example on the next slide of what this could look like, because you can really fill in the blanks. So here's 2 examples. First on the top, someone who had a job in a large consulting firm as a consultant several years back. This person did not say anything about the job, though. This is like having a job experience listed on your LinkedIn profile with no text around it. So what did that person actually do in that job? Well, based on all of the profiles that our AI has analyzed, we can see that this person very likely has these 10 skills based just on the job and the company. So these are likely skills that this person has. And the other example on the bottom is one dear to my heart as a graduate of the Carnegie Mellon Tepper School of Business. Here is a list of skills that a current MBA student at the Carnegie Mellon Tepper School likely has, based on all of the different individuals we've seen coming through that program. So if you're looking at someone from that school, you can say, well, here's the skills this person likely has. And someone from a different program is going to have a slightly different set of skills. It's going to be overlap, but likely to be some difference. So this is just an example of how this kind of skills orientation can work. And you can flip the script as well. You can make this skills information now accessible to candidates, which is a really transformative experience for the candidate. What this candidate can do is take their profile, usually represented again as a resume, put that into your career site, and see exactly why their skills and background are relevant to a job. So in this case, this candidate put the resume in, and the jobs are then ranked in order for them based on their background, and they can see on the bottom right what skills they have that match the requirements of the job. So this is something which is particularly transformative at this time when the number of applications you're getting is probably going up. You can make sure that those candidates are having a great interaction with you from the very first experience, because this is not something that they're going to get elsewhere. They're not going to have any kind of transparency like this. You can try this for yourself if you're interested to see what this looks like. Go to eightfold.ai, our career site there. We're currently hiring for some positions. I think there's about 20 out there now. And you could upload your resume and see if you match to any of our current open positions and why. Don't worry, you don't have to apply just because you put your resume in, and we observe privacy policy. So if you leave it from there, we'll throw out that information. But you can see how this works for yourself. Now, you can, of course, apply this to internal use cases as well. You can apply this to transform your internal mobility, something that Claude was talking about earlier. Just like that candidate experience, you can show your employees exactly how their skills match the needs of an internal job. This experience is a little bit different because an employee may also want to update their skills and improve their skills in order to make themselves more ready for a future job. So not only can the employees see which skills they have that meet the needs of the job, they can also gain those skills. The employee can look at a future job and can see which skills they may need in order to approach that job in the future. For example, myself personally, if I want to someday be a chief revenue officer, what skills would I need to undertake in order to meet that role in the future? Using this artificial intelligence, I can understand the skill gap that I have, and I can even find the learning experiences that will help me to fill that skill gap. This becomes an incredibly powerful way to encourage employees to grow. And I think very critically, this type of capability, this type of coaching can be done fully remotely because it's all digital and can be done at the employee's own pace. I want to give just one more use case around how skills can be so transformative, especially now. No, the next one is fine. Benchmark, Danny. So this is a real example. An organization wanted to understand how the skills of a portion of its workforce benchmarked against competing organizations and also over time. This is for a group of employees who are customer facing, they face the public, and this organization has thousands of employees in this role across North America. What was able to be done with this type of capability is understand each individual. Each of these thousands of individuals could be analyzed to the skills that they have and could be benchmarked against the similar skill set at peer organizations to understand how prevalent skills were, whether those skills were skills that were increasing or decreasing over time in that workforce, and whether these were skills that were being seen more or less in peer organizations, that the organization at large that we were working with could decide on training programs for its customer-facing workforce. So this now becomes bottoms-up benchmarking and planning for the future. Everything here, all this kind of capability, this is not a science project. These are business-ready applications that are being used today around the world. Very quick example, a global technology company that's using skills-based hiring has been able to reduce recruiter time used in hiring by 50%. So for every hour that a recruiter would need to spend per candidate, per role in the past, that time is now reduced by 50% because they can understand the skills so much better for each individual. A large Fortune 500 firm was able to use skills-based capability to avoid layoffs. They had a department that unfortunately was going to be impacted by a planned layoff. For each individual, they were able to determine if there were currently available roles that matched their skills and potential. And they were able to offer redeployment options to 40% of the impacted workforce. Really, really dramatic change in how they could treat their workers and also how they could use the jobs that they have available today. Finally, an airline using skills-based candidate experience, that hiring experience, was able to dramatically increase the rate of applications they have and also improve the candidate quality because candidates were motivated to apply for the right jobs. So these are just a few examples of what's happening already with skills. I know I've got many questions coming in, but I want to turn it back over now to Danny to give just a couple more points and then look forward to answering some of your questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is Claude. I just wanted to touch on a couple of other things to wrap up. We've been really drilling down into this. I wanted to just pull this back up to a little bit higher level to end. And first of all, thanks, Steve, for what I think is a very insightful look at how this can all work and how we can turn this around and make skills a strength. So before we get to the questions, just wanted a couple of reminders is beyond the detail that we're talking about is to build a stronger skills orientation. Having and fostering a growth mindset in your organization is really important. It's realized by helping employees believe that no matter where they sit on the skills development spectrum, everyone is capable of learning and achieving, and that you grow through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. So this creates a foundation of continuous learning aimed at developing skills that can advance careers and, while obviously also helping the organization thrive and meet its goals. And then the second concept, just remind everyone of the need to build agility, which is very important in today's, VUCA business environment. There's a lot of ambiguity out there in terms of what is needed. Organizations don't always know what's in front of them, so you need to develop a lot of different skills, and one of them is the ability of solving problems as they come using the skills that you have accumulated. So not only specific skills, but being critical thinkers, pulling those skills and applying them to solve challenges associated with new experience. In essence, learning agility is merely knowing what to do when you don't know what to do by applying in very strategic, practical ways different skills that you've acquired. And so I think that's a really important point in all this as well. So with that, let's tackle a few questions. We've got about 8 minutes.
All right. Let me see. I'd love to answer some questions here. I've seen a lot come in, so thank you so much, and I look forward to answering as many as we can in the time required. Someone here did ask if the recording would be available afterwards. Yes, the recording will be provided after the call. Yes. So we got several questions around. Let's see here. We've got a few questions around skills versus competencies. And the way I think about competency today is competency is usually defined as a group of skills required for a job. I try to avoid the word competency because I think it will create a little confusion. I don't think that our approach is going to be at odds. If you think about competencies today, you may think competency for role X requires these 10 skills. Our approach enables us to just not think about that idea of competency, because we'll look at that role and we'll see the skills that predict success in that role. We'll see the skills that an individual in that role most frequently has. I think if we start to focus too much on competency, that may start to imply that the set of skills that are associated with a given role are going to be fixed in time, or that set of skills that's associated with the role will be the same in every industry or every company or every country, which is not the case. So that's why we tend not to talk about competency and to just talk about it in terms of skills. Yeah. So got a question about, let's see, can you say what you mean more about why skills are the best measure of career progression? Well, the reason I say that is because the best measure of what you can succeed at in your career is what you're able to do. And that really comes back to what we mean by potential. If you have strong skills in order to do something in your career, then you should be able to move into that different career path or see how you could move into that different career path. I think that may be especially important now when There's such a huge amount of disruption in the job market. All of our jobs are changing. If for those of us in these so-called white-collar jobs, if for no better reason than we're working at home as opposed to in an office. So by breaking it down to skills and saying, you've proven you can do this, and therefore you could take this other paying job, that's why that skills capability is so important. Yes, let's see. Talks about competency. We've got a question about clarifying how we can build, how we build our profiles and resumes, or where we pull them from. So I want to clarify that we're not building a resume. For example, it's not that we're going to say here's a resume of a an ideal vice president of sales. That's not really how we're presenting it. We're pulling these profiles from all of the sources of talent information that we have access to. In most cases, that is the clients we work with. We will use the data that they can provide in order to train our model further and provide more examples of the career paths that exist in the world today. So we are pulling those all in compliance with relevant security, privacy standards, and best practices both in the United States, Europe, and around the world. I see several questions here around specific skills. For example, is go-to-market strategy a skill, or is marketing strategy a skill? I think in both cases, yes, that is correct. Those are skills. I'm quite sure I've seen those before. Frankly, most things that you might think of as a distinct skill, it's going to be appearing somewhere in our model. 1.4 million skills is going to include just about everything that you've thought of. I have a question here around skill level. I think that's really interesting, and this is something we discovered in terms of taking this capability and turning it into business-ready applications, because we're not here to deliver something that we'd then throw you a binder or give you 100 slides of PowerPoint and then say, okay, good luck. This is about business-ready applications that you can actually deploy and use them. And what we discovered is that some measure of skill strength was challenging for the organizations we work with to use. So we simplified it to focus on whether someone has the skill enough, whether the evidence shows that they have enough of a skill that they could deploy it at work. And if they don't have enough of that skill, then we wouldn't show it as a skill that that person would have. So that's how we differentiate between skill level, to try to make it as simple as possible for usability. Let's see. I got a question about integration. Do we integrate with Workday? Yes, we do. Our technology lives on top of your existing applicant tracking, human resource information, and LMS systems. We have integrated already across multiple clients with all of the common enterprise systems. So Workday, we have many clients already who use both Eightfold and Workday, as well as Oracle products, SAP SuccessFactors, and others.
We've got just about a minute left. If you can maybe one or two more short ones.
Sure. I want to answer a question. Someone here asked about bias. I asked, wouldn't looking at social media or university rankings produce bias in the skills assessment? I want to touch on this very clearly because this is something which is foundational for us, preventing bias. Within our AI, we use a methodology called equal opportunity algorithms that prevents bias based on age, gender, ethnicity, or other legally protected and potential bias-producing factors. Without going into the technical aspects of this, what this means is for any factors we're looking at as predictive, including skills, we will test to make sure that the outcome is not going to be differential based on any of these factors, such as age, gender, ethnicity. If there was anything that might be seen as introducing bias. That means we have to update the model, and we will not deploy or use any model that is going to exhibit any bias. We retest this constantly, and we also, with our clients, will review the results of this analysis to make sure that they can see how this is working. So we're very, very serious about this.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. We've hit the top of the hour. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you in particular to Steve Feyer of Eightfold and Eightfold for sponsoring us. Thank you especially for taking time out of your busy days and being such an engaged audience, asking so many questions. This is a complex topic, and we appreciate trying to zero in on things that aren't quite clear. We again appreciate your support to Brandon Hall Group and our webinars. Have a great rest of the day. We hope to see you in another webinar soon. Thanks, Steve, and thanks everyone, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.